There are places in the cosmos where even the concept of time forgets itself, where the rise and fall of eras become nothing more than faint scratches against an endless obsidian canvas. It was into such a place that Sun Wukong, the immortal Monkey King, found himself drifting, neither falling nor flying, but simply being, suspended between breaths of a universe that did not recognize him. He had crossed many realms in his quest for enlightenment, from the heavens of the Jade Emperor to the darkened caverns beneath the old world. His staff had shaken mountains, his defiance had split the sky, his laughter had once echoed through the palace of gods. And yet here, in this silent, lightless womb of the void, all that he was, his pride, his irreverence, his immortality, felt strangely muted, as though swallowed by something older, vaster, and utterly indifferent. There was no chi here, no divine resonance, no celestial thread connecting him to the tapestry of creation, only a suffocating stillness that pressed against his immortal skin like a cold hand. For the first time in countless ages, Wukong felt alone. His golden eyes narrowed, trying to pierce the murk. What he sensed was not emptiness, but attention, a vast and dispassionate awareness stretching across an unfathomable expanse. It was not watching him, not exactly. It was simply aware of him, as the abyss is aware of a single drifting ember. And that quiet acknowledgement bore the weight of something ancient, something that had forgotten the meaning of mercy long before his own birth. Wukong tightened his grip around the Ruyi Jingu Bang, his staff shrinking to the size of a needle in the palm of his hand. But even the familiar weight of it felt different here, duller, heavier, as if the void itself sought to smother its divine nature. The Monkey King frowned, his tail flicking once in annoyance. What trick is this? What deity dares attempt to drown my power? Yet the void answered with silence, the kind of silence that devours questions. The next moment came not as an explosion, nor a blinding light, but a distortion like a wound tearing open in the fabric of reality. There was a sound, faint at first, then building, whispers, chants, cries that were not voices but memories of voices, soaked in desperation and faith long calcified into madness. Something pulled him, not violently, but inevitably. Wukong resisted out of instinct. He summoned his strength, pushed back with will alone, but the void did not bend, did not strain. It simply accepted him, absorbing his defiance as if it were nothing more than a grain of dust resisting a gale. The world twisted, time shuddered, and Sun Wukong fell not through space, but through fate itself. The first as well dated, also well stated, and the pro-chester dated. He awoke to light, but it was not the golden radiance of heaven, nor the soothing glow of mortal dawn. It was harsh, sterile, and metallic, a cold white brilliance that stung his eyes and cast long shadows against endless grey steel. The place smelled of oil, incense, and something else he could not name, an undercurrent of sorrow, perhaps, a mechanical sorrow, sharp and ancient. He stood atop a colossal structure, part cathedral, part fortress, part machine. Towers coated with gold leaf and sanctified script stretched into the smog-choked sky. Countless statues of armored giants loomed over him, each carved with reverence bordering on fanaticism. The air hummed with electricity, and beneath that hum, like a dying heartbeat, Wukong sensed something immense, something held together by the prayers and fear of trillions. The Monkey King inhaled slowly. This world, it has no gods. He did not know why he thought that, but the thought clung to his mind with strange certainty. Wukong stepped to the edge of the vast platform and looked out over an impossible horizon. A planet-sized city, packed with towers upon towers, each more oppressive than the last. It stretched so far that the curvature of the world itself bowed beneath the weight of civilization. Billions of voices murmured in the air, cries, orders, hymns, screams, all folded together into a single suffocating drone. A place ruled not by harmony, but by fear. This realm is sick, Wukong thought. It clings to life through suffering alone. Something shifted in the wind, an unfamiliar presence. Not divine, not spiritual, but heavy, disciplined, and rigid. A formation of armored soldiers approached, clad in black and gold, their visors glowing like molten embers. Each step they took reverberated with religious authority. A squad of custodians, the guardians of the Golden Throne. They surrounded him without raising their weapons, though the tension in the air thickened like coagulated blood. One stepped forward. His voice was low, resonant, mechanical. "You do not belong here. Identify yourself." Wukong tilted his head, amused despite the oppressive atmosphere. "Identify myself? Since when has the universe demanded introductions?" The custodians did not move. The Monkey King smirked. "Very well. I am Sun Wukong, great sage equal to heaven, destroyer of armies, breaker of..." A ripple of warp energy sliced across his words. It was faint, but unmistakable, the psychic disturbance of a dozen astropaths recoiling, screaming out in terror as they sensed him. "These readings," another custodian muttered. "He is not of the warp. Then what is he? An anomaly? A threat? A blasphemy?" Wukong felt the shift in intent before they moved. He sighed. "So, this is how your greeting proceeds." With a single flick of his wrist, the Ruyi Jingu Bang expanded, slamming into the ground with a quake that shook the entire platform. Sparks showered, servo skulls shrieked. The custodians staggered, their armor groaning under the sudden force. Wukong's voice was quiet but deadly. "I have crossed the heavens. I have defied Buddha himself. If you raise your blades against me, you will fall." For a moment, the world held its breath. Then something deeper than steel, deeper even than faith, stirred beneath the planet's surface. A whisper of agony, endless and old. A presence bound by wires and worship. A corpse god whose existence bled into the warp like a wound that refused to close. Wukong felt it. The Emperor. His eyes widened not in fear, but in astonished, involuntary respect. A being dying for 10,000 years, yet still holding an entire civilization together by sheer will alone. A broken god. A trapped god. A god who had sacrificed everything to hold back the dark. Wukong's tail shivered. For the first time since he entered this realm, he felt the faintest tremor of something like sorrow. "This world," he whispered, "is a prison made of devotion." The custodians charged, and the Monkey King smiled. The legend had entered Warhammer 40K, and the galaxy would tremble. The custodians moved with the precision of living statues brought to furious life. Their halberds carved arcs through the stale air, each swing heavy with centuries of training and sanctified violence. To any mortal, their charge would have been the last sight before death. To Sun Wukong, it was almost nostalgic. He had faced celestial guards before Jade Emperor's soldiers, heavenly generals clad in divine armor, angels of law and order, trying to shackle a creature that refused to kneel. The golden ghosts of those battles flitted through his mind as the first custodian reached him, weapon raised in an overhead strike meant to cleave apart gods and daemons alike. He stepped aside. The halberd slammed into the ground where he had stood, splitting reinforced ceramite as if it were half-baked clay. Wukong's staff flicked outward, faster than thought, tapping the wielder's helmet with deceptive gentleness. The impact rang like a cracked bell. The custodians stumbled backward, 3 paces, boots grinding against the platform, armor systems screaming silent warnings. The others closed in around Wukong, forming a ring of gold and black, lenses burning with focused hostility. The Monkey King spun the Ruyi Jingu Bang in his hand, its length shifting fluidly, the metal humming with an ancient, alien divinity. "You call this a welcome?" he asked softly. "Is hospitality another thing this world has forgotten?" None answered. They lunged together. He could have shattered them, he knew it. The thought came not with arrogance, but with the calm certainty of an immortal who had broken armies and casually humiliated deities. Yet something held him back, attention, a subtle weight pressing from somewhere beneath the planet, like a gaze that had no eyes. The corpse on the throne was watching. Wukong's movements blurred, each strike calculated to disarm rather than annihilate. A twist of his staff knocked a halberd from iron fingers. A kick sent another custodian sliding across the platform. He dodged bolts of searing energy with infuriating ease, his figure becoming a streak of gold and red against the dull sky. Their frustration grew. Their faith did not waver. Far away, deep in the labyrinthine guts of Terra, another kind of battle was taking place. In a chamber veiled in incense smoke and psychic residue, a choir of astropaths writhed in silent agony. Their sockets, burned hollow by years of staring into the warp, now leaked ichor and light. They had seen something, a shape, a fracture, a presence that did not belong. "He is not a daemon," one whispered, voice raw and shaking. "He is not a shard of the warp," another croaked. "He stands beside it, yet untouched." "Impossible," hissed a third, old hands clutching frayed robes. "Nothing lives outside its taint. Not anymore." A figure bathed in half-shadow stepped closer. The sigil of the Inquisition gleamed like a wound on his breastplate. His eyes were sharp, hungry not for knowledge, but for control. "Show me," the Inquisitor said. The astropaths linked their minds with trembling discipline. For a heartbeat, the scream of the warp flooded the room, a tide of madness clawing at the walls. Within that chaos, a single silhouette remained clear, slim, defiant, wreathed in a light that was not holy, not profane, but simply other. A staff, shifting in size without obeying any law of matter, a tail flicking lazily in the wind. Eyes that glowed not with sorcery, but with the timeless arrogance of something that had survived gods and punishments and still refused to bend. The Inquisitor's jaw tightened. "A Xenos demigod," one of the astropaths whispered, as though naming it made it more real. "A deviant shard of some forgotten pantheon? A test," the Inquisitor murmured. "Or a threat. The distinction may not matter." He turned away from the struggling psykers. "Send word to the High Lords," he ordered, "and to the Fabricator General's agents. Terra has gained a visitor. We will not treat him as a guest. Backings, visibly ways. Backings." On the surface of the throne world, Sun Wukong leapt to another tower with a single bound, the massive city planet unfolding beneath him like a rotting tapestry. He left the staggered Custodians behind, more confused than defeated, as he sought a vantage point high enough to see the truth of this place. He found it atop a broken Aquila statue, its stone wings cracked and crumbling under the weight of the ages. From there, he gazed upon Terra. What he saw was not a world, but a scar. The sky was not merely polluted, it was strangled, choked with the breath of countless engines, manufactorums, and spires. The clouds were sickly, tinged with the colors of rust and old blood. There was no green, no open field, no wild mountain daring to exist without a cathedral hammered into its back. Every inch of the planet was harnessed, chained, forced into service. Wukong had walked through mortal empires before. He had watched dynasties rise, conquer, decay, and die. But this was different. This empire had outlived its purpose, yet refused to fall. It clung to existence like a corpse lashed to a throne, pretending to rule. He listened. Beneath the thunder of engines and the distant boom of orbital guns, there were prayers. Endless, droning prayers. Billions of voices muttering the same words again and again and again, until meaning and faith dissolved into a single numbing noise. They were not praying for joy. They were not praying for wisdom. They were praying because they were afraid. Fear bound this realm, fear of the alien, fear of the daemon, fear of their own heretical thoughts, fear even of the god they worshipped, for his silence was as terrifying as his gaze. "This is not a kingdom," Wukong murmured. "It is a cage built around a dead star." His words vanished into the choking air. He thought of the Jade Emperor's court, of its arrogance and cruelty, of the heavenly bureaucracy he had once smashed and humiliated. He remembered chains of divine metal crushing his limbs beneath Five Elements Mountain, the weight of a punishment intended to last forever. He had hated that prison. Terra was worse. Here, an entire species had chained itself. He could sense it in the workers who toiled in factories deep below, skins scorched by radiation and fumes. In the soldiers drilled to die without question. In the nobles cloaked in ridiculous finery, hiding their terror behind rituals and titles. Even in the Custodians, bound to a throne they could never truly leave, serving a master whose body rotted while his mind bled into unreality. Sun Wukong was many things: arrogant, impulsive, defiant. But he was not blind. "This galaxy has forgotten what freedom feels like," he said quietly. A new sound pricked his ears. Mechanical footsteps clanged against metal as a procession approached from a lower platform. Robed figures, their bodies festooned with cables, augmetics, blinking lenses. The air around them buzzed with static, the machine spirits they worshipped restless and suspicious. Adeptus Mechanicus. They bore devices that hummed ominously, each more grotesque than the last psycho-reactive scanners, dimensional analyzers, things that reeked faintly of the warp while pretending to be above it. Servo arms clicked and flexed as they raised intricate instruments, framing him within arcs of pale energy. "How curious," one of them intoned, voice layered with vox distortion. No warp signature, no Geller echo, no imprint of the Astronomicon. "Impossible," another rasped. "All things that think are stained by the immaterium, and yet the readings do not lie. This entity stands outside the Emperor's light, and outside the reach of the ruinous powers." Wukong looked down at them, amused. "Are you priests," he asked, "or scrap heaps that learned how to talk?" A few nearby guards flinched, as though expecting divine retribution for such blasphemy. The robed tech priests did not react to the insult. Whether they were beyond offense or simply too engrossed in their data, it was hard to say. "Subject exhibits irreverence toward all authority," one noted calmly. "Possible threat classification, anathema. Possible use case classification," another countered. "Asset." Their lenses whirred as they refocused. For a brief moment, Wukong felt like an insect pinned to a board, not because they could hold him, but because they believed that naming him would grant them power over what they did not understand. He had seen that before, too. Gods and men alike, desperate to cage the unknown with titles. A breeze grazed his fur. Locked inside that breeze, fragile as a dying ember, he sensed again the Emperor's presence, weak, bound, yet impossibly vast. This whole world, this whole empire, orbited around that broken will. "Is this your doing?" Wukong wondered silently. "Is this what you built? A galaxy of shackles and screams?" There was no answer. Only the static-laced mutter of tech priests and the distant, monotonous roar of a civilization consuming itself to stay alive one more day. Sun Wukong straightened on his perch, staff resting lightly against his shoulder. He had not asked to come here. No mandate from Buddha, no decree from higher realms had sent him. Yet here he stood, in a universe suffocating under the weight of its own terror. For the first time since his exile beneath Five Elements Mountain, he felt something disturbingly close to curiosity. How far, he wondered, does this rot spread? And somewhere beyond Terra's poisoned sky, beyond its orbital guns and defense grids, the stars burned cold and distant, watching a legend from another reality step onto the stage of the 41st millennium. The galaxy did not yet know his name, but it would. The hive world beneath Terra's orbit was a monument to human suffering, a sprawl of rusted towers, labyrinthine slums, and manufactorums that roared without pause. Its skies were stained the color of old wounds. Its air was heavy with the fumes of a billion machines. Every breath felt like swallowing iron filings and despair. It was here that Sun Wukong descended, not with divine fanfare or celestial brilliance, but with the quiet, almost playful grace of a wandering immortal curious about the extent of human misery. He landed atop a transport crawler, startling the workers inside. They stared up at him with hollow eyes, their terror dulled by exhaustion. They had seen eldritch horrors in picked feeds, heard tales of daemons from the ecclesiarchy, and been taught since childhood that anything not human was a threat. Wukong's tail flicked lazily as he crouched, peering into one of the grimy windows. "What a joyless place this is," he murmured. The workers recoiled, whispering prayers, clutching rusted icons of the God Emperor. Their fear was palpable, thick enough to taste in the air. Wukong sighed. "Is this how your God wishes you to live? To fear every shadow?" His question drifted unanswered into the smog. Moments later, alarms began to wail. "Interse, my Alpha, en Paise." Adeptus Arbites were the first to arrive, black-armored enforcers, whose grim zealotry made them more machine than men. Their boots thudded against the metal streets as they formed firing lines around Wukong, weapons raised. "Xenos entity," a Vox-amplified voice bellowed. "By Imperial decree, you are to be contained for immediate exterminatus-level evaluation." Wukong blinked, unimpressed. "Contain? Exterminate? You truly have no imagination." The Arbites opened fire. Bolts arced through the air. Explosive rounds meant to tear apart armored heretics. Wukong spun his staff at impossible speed, the weapon lengthening, twisting, deflecting each shot with a ringing crack that echoed across the street. Some bolts flew skyward, detonating like tiny suns. To the Arbites, he was a blur too fast, too fluid, too alive. Something that danced between bullets not by chance, but by mastery. One Arbiter attempted to flank him. Wukong vanished. A heartbeat later, he appeared behind the Enforcer, tapping him on the helmet with a finger. The man crumpled, unconscious, not dead. "You're loud and clumsy," Wukong said, "but you are not my enemies. You are merely lost." His mercy did nothing to calm them. In fact, it terrified them more. "Inhuman reflexes," one shouted. "Warp corruption confirmed," another cried. "Requesting kill team deployment." The Arbites retreated, terrified but disciplined enough to regroup. Wukong stood in the middle of the widening circle, Ruyi Jingu Bang resting across his shoulders. His gaze drifted upward. Dark shapes pierced the smog. Drop pods. "Interse, my Alf," the Redin divined. They hit the ground like thunder. A fissure split the metal streets. Shockwaves rippled through the hive. Civilians screamed, fleeing into alleyways as a unit of Deathwatch Space Marines emerged, giants clad in midnight armor, the silver arm of their left gauntlet gleaming beneath the toxic sun. Each Marine bore the sigils of their parent chapters. Ultramarines, Space Wolves, Blood Angels, each a monster in their own right, each sworn to destroy all alien life. Their captain, a towering figure with a red helm, leveled a bolter the size of a cannon at Wukong. "Xenos," he said, his voice a low growl through Vox. "Identify your species." Wukong raised an eyebrow. "I've already told your golden servants. Why must you all ask the same tedious question?" "Threat classification, Omega," the captain said. "Prepare to engage." A Marine charged, power sword crackling with caged lightning. He brought it down in a blow that would have bisected a tank. Wukong caught the blade between two fingers. The Marine froze. "How heavy your hearts must be," Wukong said softly, twisting the sword until it snapped like brittle bone. "How long have you carried this burden of fear?" With a flick of his wrist, he sent the giant flying through a building. Steel buckled, concrete shattered, screams erupted from within. The Deathwatch opened fire. Bolter rounds detonated around him. Flamers spewed gouts of burning promethium. Plasma hissed through the air. Wukong weaved between them as though dancing, bounding off walls, flipping through spirals of fire, parrying plasma blasts with his staff. The hive quaked with the fury of their battle. A Marine attempted to pin him, launching a graviton charge. Wukong swatted it aside, sending it tumbling under a tank-sized hauler. The vehicle imploded under its own increased mass, collapsing like a dying star. Still, the Marines did not break. They advanced, relentless, unwavering, fanatic. Wukong paused, regarding them with something resembling admiration. "Your faith is impressive," he said. "Misguided, but impressive." He spun the Ruyi Jingu Bang, its size expanding to the width of the street. With a sweeping arc, he sent the entire squad tumbling like toys, slamming them into walls, onto rooftops, into the ground. Armor dented. Bones cracked. But they rose. Again. And again. "Why?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. The captain's voice boomed through the smoke. "Because humanity must endure." "Endure what?" Wukong replied. "This misery? This cage you call an empire?" The captain leveled his bolter. "Everything." The word hung in the blistering air. For a moment, the clash halted not by truce, but by an ancient, instinctive awareness that something older than either of them was watching. The sky dimmed. The metal beneath their feet vibrated. A psychic scream rippled through the hive, silent and deafening all at once, a tremor that made even the Marines falter. Astropaths across the sector cried out. The warp heaved, as if reacting to Wukong's presence. And from that warp tide came whispers. Not words. Intent. Curiosity. Desire. Hunger. The ruinous powers had taken notice. Khorne's rage. Tzeentch's machinations. Slaanesh's fascination. Nurgle's embrace. Their attention fell on Wukong like a cosmic spotlight. The Marines steadied themselves, recognizing the shift. "What have you summoned, creature?" the captain snarled. Wukong's golden eyes narrowed not in fear, but irritation. "I summon nothing," he said, "but something has taken interest." The captain fired. Wukong disappeared. Reappearing behind him, he tapped the Marine's back gently. "I tire of this." The captain staggered forward, armor cracked. "You fight like men who do not know why they fight," Wukong said. "Only that someone told you to." The Marines surrounded him again, though their breathing was ragged, their armor ruined. The clash might have continued endlessly, but the air suddenly thickened with static. Servo lights flickered, reality bent in small, unsettling ways. A warp storm was forming overhead. Not natural, not random, drawn to him. Sun Wukong stood amidst the wreckage, staff resting on his shoulder, tail flicking absently as the hive trembled. He looked upward into the churning sky. "So, the gods of this realm wish to see me." His grin widened. "Let them try." And far across the immaterium, 4 ancient beings leaned closer, their curiosity sharpening into desire. The legend had drawn the gaze of chaos, and the Warhammer galaxy had just inhaled its first breath of catastrophe. The warp storm did not fully break upon the hive world. It swelled like a bruise in the sky, veins of iridescent corruption pulsing through clouds of ash, then slowly receded as if some unseen hand had stayed the tempest at the last possible moment. But its touch had been enough. Psykers bled from their eyes and collapsed. Vox systems spat out nonsense in a dozen dead languages. Servitors froze mid-step, twitching as if unseen strings had been cut. The very air tasted metallic, as though lightning had died on the tongue. In the aftermath, the Imperium did what it always did in the face of the unknown. It tried to cage it. They en salve, when the sendies of mendinged. They came not with thunder this time, but with precision. On the broken streets still bearing the scars of Wukong's clash with the Death Watch, a new presence unfolded, quiet, methodical, draped in crimson and sigils of authority. Inquisitorial rosettes glinted beneath hoods. Mechanical incense burners hissed in the hands of robed adepts. Heavy, rune-etched machines were lowered from grav transports by servo arms, their surfaces crowded with psionic dampeners and flickering hexagrammic wards. The Death Watch captain knelt, armor cracked, helm dented, but still unbroken. Wukong had left him alive. Mercy, perhaps, or contempt. An Inquisitor approached him, tall and lean, his face pale and lined like old parchment. One eye was natural, the other, a burning, augmetic lens that never quite stopped focusing, as if the world were a specimen. "Report," the Inquisitor said. "We engaged the Xenos entity," the captain answered. "It exhibits strength beyond Astartes levels, speed beyond most known demons, and no detectable warp signature. It fights as if this were all a game." The Inquisitor's gaze drifted over the shattered avenue, the crumpled vehicles, the twisted metal where graviton charges had warped matter like clay. "And yet," he murmured, the warp storm flared in response to him. "Yes," the captain said, "the ruinous powers are watching." "Good," the Inquisitor replied, voice devoid of irony. "If chaos desires him, then we must ensure it never has the chance to claim him." He turned to the robed figures hovering near the newly arrived machinery. "Deploy the null array," he ordered, "and prepare the anchor field. We will not hunt this creature across the stars. We will make the cosmos itself drag him into our chains." "With provid so than disasay. With provid so the disasay." Sun Wukong sat at the edge of a tower, legs dangling over the abyss like a child perched on a rooftop, watching the hive glimmer with its sickly lights. The brief flare of the warp storm still lingered in his senses, like the aftertaste of something foul. He had never liked the taste of gods. The attention of the chaos powers had brushed against him like the claws of vultures testing flesh. Rage, deceit, lust, decay, each had tried to probe his essence, to measure the shape of his soul. Each had recoiled, for what they found was maddeningly outside their design. He was not born of their realm. His immortality did not come from their bargains. His strength was not the gift of some insane, dying star. He was, simply, himself. It made them hungry. It made them afraid. The thought made him smile. Then he felt it. Not warp, not divine. Something colder, more clinical. A pressure in the air, like the moment before a trap snaps shut, subtle but growing. The sky above flickered. Runes, invisible to mortal eyes, flared into being around the hive, forming a lattice of dim, angular light. They unfolded like the petals of a mechanical flower, enclosing the city in a geometric snare. The hum of human-made witchcraft thrummed through the towers. "Ah," Wukong murmured, "the cage-makers have returned." The null array snapped into place. He felt it at once. The world tightened around him, reality congealing. His staff felt heavier in his hand. The air grew thick, not with heat or poison, but with restraint. It was as if the universe itself had been commanded to notice him, measure him, define him, command him to stay. He stood. Across the hive, on rooftops and platforms, arrays of black iron pylons came alive, their surfaces etched with sigils that burned with a pale blue light. Psychic projectors whined into focus. Data streams screamed between orbiting ships and the Inquisition's command centers. Somewhere far above, a tether of gravitic force latched onto the point where he stood, like an anchor line thrown across dimensions. The Inquisitor watched it unfold from a command sanctum deep beneath the hive's upper levels, surrounded by chanting psykers wired into machines that drained their sanity drop by drop. Field cohesion at 88%, an adept reported. Subject is localized within the primary anchor locus. Commence lockdown protocol, the Inquisitor said, and bring in the sisters, with profited dis, and availabos, with those in life, in the spenders and down of the callous. The world around Wukong flickered. One blink he was standing on the edge of the hive tower, the storm-scarred sky pressing down around him. The next blink steel, darkness, incense, humming machines. They had not moved him in the usual sense. They had folded space like paper, forced the universe to agree that here was where he now belonged. He looked around. A circular chamber, walls lined with null field generators, radiating a suffocating emptiness. No key flowed here, no breath of heaven. Even the subtle spark of his own divinity felt smothered, compressed into something small and dense. At the edge of the room stood a ring of Sisters of Silence, their faces cold beneath smooth helms. Their very presence exuded absence, no psychic echo, no inner flame. They were voids in human shape, and their collective aura pressed against him like a tide that sought to erase his name from the fabric of existence. Beyond them, inquisitors and tech priests observed from a shielded gallery, murmuring, measuring. "Curious," Wukong said, rolling his shoulders as if testing an old wound. "You've built a room to kill the soul." One sister stepped forward, her silence more eloquent than any threat. "In this place," the Inquisitor's voice rang out from the gallery, "daemons wither, gods fall quiet. Even the whispers of the warp cannot intrude. You are alone here, creature." Wukong considered that. Alone. He remembered the crushing weight of Five Elements Mountain, the centuries of solitude, the smug satisfaction of the heavens above, as they believed him buried and broken. He remembered how, even then, he had been unable to kill the spark of laughter inside him. "Do you think I have not known prisons?" he asked softly. The Inquisitor's lens whirred faintly. "We think you have not known ours." With a gesture, he signaled. The null generators flared. The pressure intensified. Wukong's thoughts slowed, not from fear, but from the unnatural weight forced upon his being. His staff, still in his hand, throbbed in resistance, its divine nature straining against confinement. He dropped to one knee. Gasps rippled through the observers. The Inquisitor's lips curled in the ghost of a smile. Observe, even this so-called immortal bends when reality is commanded to reject him. He stepped closer to the glass, eyes glittering. You will be studied, he said. Dissected, not in flesh, but in principle. We will learn what you are, why chaos desires you, and how best to weaponize or destroy you. You will serve the Imperium, one way or another. The sisters tightened their formation, their soulless aura drilling deeper into him. For a moment, just a heartbeat, the weight was nearly enough to press Sun Wukong flat against the cold steel floor. Nearly. He exhaled. The sound was small, almost gentle. Then he smiled. Your cage is impressive, he said, but you have made one mistake. The Inquisitor's gaze sharpened. And what is that? Wukong slowly rose, joints cracking not with weakness, but with the slow, inevitable movement of something that refused to stay kneeling. You built it, he said, around the wrong idea. His grip tightened on the Rui Jingu Bang. The staff responded. It did not draw power from warp or heaven, from faith or fear. It drew power from him from the impossible stubbornness that no mountain had ever crushed, no god had ever tamed. The null fields screamed as the staff expanded, its presence shattering their calibrated assumptions. The sisters' aura pressed harder, like a tide slamming into a cliff that refused to erode. One staggered, for the first time in years feeling a flicker of something like resistance from the void she projected. The generators began to overload. What? An adept choked, hands flying across glowing sigils. Field instability. He's pushing back against the constants. This should not be possible. The Inquisitor stared, incredulity warping into fury. Increase output, he roared. Burn every psyker, you must lock the field. Psykers in adjoining chambers convulsed as energy was ripped through them to feed the null array. The chamber flooded with a roaring, invisible storm of suppression. The air grew colder, so cold that even metal seemed to tremble. Wukong laughed. It was not loud, but it was free. You think reality is fixed, he said, stepping forward even as the world tried to crush him. You think laws and fields and machines can tell the cosmos what is permitted. His tail curled lazily behind him, as if in direct mockery of the tension grinding their teeth. You forget something, he whispered. He swung the staff. The null field cracked no sound, no visible shattering, just a sudden, sickening lurch in the chamber as all their meticulously woven balances tore. Sigils flared and died. The sisters staggered, their anti-psychic aura buckling under the strain of a force that was neither psychic nor mundane. Divine rebellion. Not from this universe. Not bound by its rules. The Rui Jingu Bang slammed into the floor. The impact knocked several sisters to their knees and sent a shockwave through the foundations of the facility. Lights burst. Machines howled. Somewhere, deep below, the faintest echo of a dying god's attention brushed the chamber. The Emperor had noticed. Sun Wukong stood straight once more, golden eyes glowing not with warp fire, but with incandescent, feral joy. You cannot bind what never accepted your laws, he said. The cage still held for now, but it groaned, strained, and whispered in the language of failing constructs. The Imperium had tried to chain the Monkey King, and for the second time in his long existence, a universe would learn how poorly cages fit him. The chamber still trembled from the backlash of Wukong's defiance. Null generators sparked, their internal wards collapsing like brittle bones. Mechanicus adepts scrambled to stabilize the failing field, their metallic limbs twitching, incense burners spilling sacred oils across the grated floor. The Sisters of Silence braced themselves, their auras pulsing irregularly, like lantern flames caught in a storm. But it was not the shaking metal or dying machines that made the air grow cold. It was the presence. A vastness pressing in from beyond the boundaries of matter. A breath inhaled by something titanic, eternal, and hungry. The warp was watching. And then the whispers began. Not through sound, not through the mind, through possibility. through shifts in emotion, color, and thought, like 4 different winds blowing through the cracks of reality. Wukong turned slowly, as though he could glimpse the immaterium if he moved with enough care. His staff rested loosely in his palm, its divine surface humming with agitation. He felt the first whisper like a spark, brushing the edge of his mind. Tzeentch, the architect of fate, the whisper of change. It came as a question, a puzzle. A curved smile offered from the shadows behind the cosmos. What are you? Not accusatory, curious, almost delighted. Wukong smirked. A monkey with too much time and too little patience. Why? The air flickered blue flames, licking the edges of the chamber, dancing atop machinery without burning it. The sisters shuddered. Psykers screamed miles away. Tzeentch's laughter did not echo. It rippled, bending the space between thoughts. Chaos knows every god, every demon, every spirit, every lie. But you are none of these. A creature of myth, a spark from another tapestry. You stand beyond the scripts of this universe. Wukong twirled his staff casually. And yet, here I am. The flame winked out. But before the chamber could breathe again, the second presence surged. Khorne, the blood god, the lord of battle. The air thickened with heat and fury, rage so pure it felt like a blade pressed against the soul. Somewhere, steel groaned. Somewhere else, a sister stumbled as her nerves rebelled. A voice like an avalanche roared silently. Fight. Wukong laughed. Not politely, not nervously, joyfully. Finally, someone in this universe with simple taste. Khorne's presence slammed into the chamber, not as words, but as challenger gauntlet thrown across dimensions. Images flared in Wukong's vision, battlefields of blood, skulls piled like mountains, warriors screaming for glory, blades forged from hatred. Prove yourself. Wukong's grin widened. Perhaps later. I'm busy avoiding unpleasant doctors. The fury recoiled, not defeated, but entertained. Then came the third. A fragrance drifted across the room, sweet, heavy, distorted. The sisters' auras flickered violently. Mechanicus adepts stiffened, their implants sparking. Slaanesh, the prince of excess, the whisperer of desire. Her presence spread like silk across the chamber, seductive, poisonous, infinitely cruel. Something brushed Wukong's fur, a teasing caress that left no trace. A voice purred. Such freedom, such color, such defiance. A creature who obeys only himself, how delicious. Stay, let me peel your soul. I wish to savor its taste. Wukong wrinkled his nose. If this is seduction, you should try more showers and fewer corpses. The sweetness soured instantly, twisting into a hiss. The chamber's lights shivered under the sudden shift. Slaanesh's discontent was not loud, but it was sharp. Another whisper followed, heavy and damp and rotting. The temperature dropped. The air grew thick. A single droplet of something green and warm hit the floor, sizzling through metal. Nurgle, the Plague Father, the rot beneath all life. His presence was different. Soft, smothering, almost affectionate. A voice like a warm, wet grave murmured, "You do not fear decay, little monkey. How curious, how beautiful, how lonely you must be. Come, let grandfather embrace you. You will not wither, you will not fade. You will be loved forever." Wukong gagged dramatically. "No thank you, I prefer baths." Behind the gallery's reinforced glass, the Inquisitors and tech priests stared in silent horror, unable to see the warp entities but wholly aware of the psychic storm tearing through the chamber. Their equipment spiked, their vox systems burst, their psykers died, eyes melting into their skulls. Wukong alone remained unaffected. No, not unaffected. Apart. Outside the pattern. Beyond the reach of the warp. That was what infuriated the gods most. Tzeentch's curiosity sharpened into hunger. Khorne's amusement burned hotter. Slaanesh's fascination curdled into longing. Nurgle's affection thickened into possessiveness. 4 wills pressed inward. Reality strained. The chamber walls bent, warping like rubber beneath a giant's grip. Golden sigils flickered. Machines died. The sisters staggered, clutching their heads as their null auras wavered. Wukong straightened, golden eyes glowing with annoyance. "All of you," he said calmly. "Shut up." Four gods recoiled, not because the words were powerful, but because the tone was imperious. Bored, entirely unafraid, Wukong spun the Rui Jingu Bang once, letting the motion echo like a heartbeat across the warp storm. "I am Sun Wukong," he said, "the great sage equal to heaven. I have fought armies of immortals, toppled heavenly palaces, and endured punishments designed to erase me from existence." His tail curled lazily behind him. "If you want a piece of me..." He slammed the staff into the floor. Chaos roared. "Then get in line." The chamber ruptured. Not physically. Reality itself twisted. Technologies crafted over millennia broke under the strain. Ward machines screamed. Sisters collapsed. The null field shattered like glass. The backlash blew the Inquisitors off their feet. And the warp storm above the hive flared once more, not because chaos willed it, but because chaos could not comprehend him. Wukong stepped through the flickering cage, brushing aside collapsing energies as though walking through a curtain of dust. "Your gods are loud," he said quietly, "and very rude." He placed the staff on his shoulder and walked forward, tail swaying calmly. "And this empire," he added, "is not ready for me." Above him, the warp pulsed, four eyes narrowing, four wills sharpening. They had never encountered something like him. Something unbound, something immortal, something that did not belong. And in that not belonging, he was dangerous. The galaxy trembled. Chaos whispered. The Imperium braced. Sun Wukong smiled. The stage was set. The sky above the hive world dimmed as Sun Wukong stepped out from the shattered Null-Chamber. Smoke curled from ruptured machinery behind him. Alarms wailed across the complex. Psykers lay slumped in their restraints, emptied husks with hollowed eyes. The Sisters of Silence still knelt, trembling, their soulless auras violently destabilized by the divine rebellion they had tried to smother. Wukong did not look back. He walked through the ruins of the Inquisition's pride as casually as if he were strolling through a garden, staff resting along his shoulders, tail swaying with a languid rhythm. The air carried the scent of scorched metal and spilled incense, an artificial holiness burned away by something older than faith. Overhead, ships shifted in orbit, dozens, hundreds, a ring of steel tightening around the stricken hive world. The Imperium had felt his presence, and now the Imperium prepared for war. The Imperium strikes. From the higher towers, thunder rolled across the city as Imperial Navy gunships tore through the smog. Black-armored Valkyries screamed overhead. The ground beneath Wukong vibrated with the seismic stomp of Titans marching from their cathedral hangars. Banners of the Adeptus Mechanicus fluttered from the distant manufactorums, red cloth trailing like blood. Macro-engines groaned to life, drawing energy from the deep planetary core. A hollow voice boomed across the hive. "By order of the High Lords of Terra, the anomaly is to be purged." Wukong raised an eyebrow. "Anomaly? That's new. They grow more creative by the hour." Bolt of fire erupted. Las beams carved red streaks through the air. A squadron of Skitarii Rangers advanced with sniper precision, targeting joints, pressure points, ocular centers, everything calculated for maximum lethality. Wukong vanished in a blur. He reappeared atop a spire a kilometer away, crouching with the easy grace of a predator. A moment later, a gale wind swept across the battlefield, the shockwave created by his departure. Entire platoons staggered, towers groaned, smoke spiraled upward. Skitarii recalibrated, data streams updated their targeting. Subject movement exceeds calculated parameters. Engage suppressive fire. Deploy Pater-Rad relics. Wukong sighed. Still trying. He spun his staff slowly. The air hummed. Then he leapt. He crashed into the center of the advancing line like a meteor wrapped in sunlight. Steel shattered. Servo skulls burst like fruit. A dozen Skitarii were thrown into the air like broken dolls, and yet he did not kill any of them, not consciously. He knocked them aside, disarmed them, crushed weapons but spared bodies. It confused them, horrified them, angered them, because in the Imperium, mercy was not a virtue. Mercy was heresy. The Imperium's last argument, Titans. The ground shook. A shadow fell across the battlefield. A warlord Titan hundreds of feet tall stepped into view, its head crowned with cathedral spires, skulls and purity seals plastered across its armor like desperate prayers. Its plasma annihilator hummed, energy coalescing into a miniature star. Sun Wukong squinted up at it. "Now that," he said with amusement, "is excessive even by heavenly standards." The Titan's voice boomed from voxcasters the size of buildings. "Xenos, kneel." Wukong tilted his head. "No." The plasma annihilator discharged. Light swallowed the world. The blast vaporized a city block, turned steel into glass, melted stone into rivers of molten slag. Shockwaves pulsed outward, flattening towers and hurling debris for kilometers. Silence followed. Psykers collapsed, whispering in disbelief. The Imperium forces paused, scanning the devastation. A Mechanicus Magos chirped through Vox. Target status: unknown. Integrity of biological matter unlikely. Then a voice drifted through the rising smoke. "Are you done?" The dust parted. Wukong emerged unharmed, fur singed at the tips, ego slightly offended, but otherwise appearing as though he'd simply stepped out of a warm bath. He twirled the Ruyi Jingu Bang. "Now it's my turn." He was upon the Titan in a blink, running up its leg, each step leaving a crater in the metal. He reached its shoulder, raised his staff, and struck. The sound was like a thunderclap. Armored plates buckled inward. The Titan lurched, its servos shrieking. Entire panels came undone. Vox systems burst into static. Saint statues toppled and fell. Inside, princeps and moderati screamed as their throne interface flooded with errors. Wukong raised his staff again. He would have ended it, but something stopped him. Not force, not fear, a whisper, a memory. He had crushed enough palaces in his time. With a humph, he dropped down from the Titan, leaving it crippled but not dead. Behind him, tech priests howled in horror. The warp intervenes. Darkness rippled at the edges of reality. The warp storm that had watched Wukong earlier now coiled itself like an awakened serpent, folding inward, focusing, concentrating its ancient hunger. The chaos gods leaned closer. Khorne's fury boiled the air. Tzeentch's laughter bent the shadows. Slaanesh's breath slithered along Wukong's spine. Nurgle's rot caressed the ruins with diseased affection. The warp reacted chaotically, violently, because it could not comprehend him. His presence disrupted the lattice of possibility, broke deterministic timelines, fractured prophecy. He was an intruder, a paradox, a myth that walked where myths were not allowed. The warp tore open tiny wounds, ripping into the sky. Daemons spilled through, bloodletters with molten blades, horrors of Tzeentch twisting like nightmares given flesh, daemonettes gliding with predatory grace, plague-bearers dragging chains of flies and rot. The Imperium forces screamed. The daemons charged, and all of them, every single one, ignored the Imperium and turned toward Wukong. The Monkey King tapped his staff against the ground, eyes narrowing. "So it's to be like that, is it?" A daemonette reached him first. He flicked her away with a bored swat. A bloodletter lunged with a roar that split the air. He caught its blade between two fingers. "Too loud," he said. Then he snapped it in half. Horrors of Tzeentch hurled crackling bolts of warp fire. The flames washed over him harmlessly, their colors distorting in confusion. Nurgle's plague flies swarmed him. He yawned. With a single twirl of his staff, he unleashed a shockwave that vaporized them, shredded bloodletters, sent horrors screaming into new shapes, toppled demonettes, and even forced a greater daemon's emerging form back into its portal. The daemons fell, one after another, not slain, banished. sent back into the immaterium like misbehaving children, and the Chaos Gods felt it. Khorne snarled. Slaanesh shivered. Nurgle crooned with wounded disappointment. Tzeentch whispered a word that had not been spoken in 10,000 years. Impossible. The warp quaked. Wukong twirled his staff onto his shoulder again. You all want me so badly, he said, but none of you can touch me. His tail curled behind him. I am not yours. The galaxy holds its breath. The Imperium forces pulled back, terrified beyond reason. Daemons recoiled into rifts that stitched shut. Ships in orbit reoriented their weapons but dared not fire. Even the far-off Emperor, nailed to the Golden Throne, felt the disturbance if only as a faint shift in the tides of time. A ripple in the skein of fate, a presence he had never foreseen. A presence with no destiny. No warp signature. No allegiance. No anchor. A free creature in a galaxy built on chains. Wukong stood alone in the ruins, gazing up at the dimmed sky. Is that all? He asked, sounding almost disappointed. And somewhere far beyond the stars, the Chaos Gods drew breath. Not in anger, not in desire, but in anticipation, because this was no longer a containment operation, nor a skirmish, nor a curiosity. This was the opening movement of a war that no prophecy, no code, no god had ever accounted for. And Wukong? He smiled. For the first time since entering this universe, he felt alive. The hive world burned, not with fire alone, but with the resonance of something ancient and impossible. The warp storm above churned in agony, its colors bleeding into one another, as if the universe were trying to rewrite itself. The Imperium's armies, those still breathing, dragged their broken bodies behind ruined walls. Daemons retreated, clawing at reality in their frustration, their forms unraveling like smoke under a hostile wind. Sun Wukong stood alone at the center of the devastation, the Ruyi Jingu Bang resting across his shoulders, golden eyes reflecting an apocalypse not of his making. He did not look triumphant. He did not look angry. He looked thoughtful. For in that moment, he understood something he had only glimpsed until now, the true shape of this universe. The truth behind the iron faith, behind the endless war, behind the prayers whispered into dying air. He felt it ripple across the hive, across Terra, across every star in the galaxy. A presence, a will, a burden heavy enough to crush suns. The dying god, the emperor of mankind. And the emperor, sensing Wukong's awareness, reached back. Not in words, not in thought. In truth, the emperor's message. It hit Wukong like a tidal wave of broken light. In an instant, his mind was dragged across 10,000 years of human suffering, worlds burning in the name of a corpse god, fleets dying to protect an empire that could no longer sustain itself, psykers screaming as they were chained to the Golden Throne to keep a single lighthouse burning in an ocean of nightmares. He saw the Emperor's dream unity, enlightenment, peace, and how it had rotted from the inside, eaten alive by dogma, fear, desperation. He saw Terra as it had been, vibrant and ambitious. Then, as it was now, a rusted heart choking on its own blood. Then he felt the Emperor himself, a constant agony. A consciousness stretched thin across the galaxy. A god not by choice, but by necessity. Nailed to the throne of a dying species. Wukong staggered. His staff dug into the ground to steady him. He whispered, "This is your realm." A wordless answer came. It carried sorrow older than the Imperium itself. Wukong had mocked this universe, laughed at its fear, toyed with its armies. But now, he understood the weight the Emperor bore, and why his people lived in chains. Not because he wanted it, because if he let go, the galaxy would drown in the warp. Wukong exhaled slowly. "So you hold the darkness back alone," he murmured, "and they worship you for it, instead of helping you." A pulse of weary affirmation trembled through him, and then something else. A question. A hope so fragile it felt like breaking glass. "Will you stand with me?" Wukong closed his eyes. He saw the galaxy. He saw its ugliness. He saw its beauty buried under blood and metal. He saw, for the first time, what it meant to be eternal, in a place ruled by eternal war. "This is not my world," he said quietly into the void, "but I see why you endure." His tail swayed slowly behind him. "And I see why you are dying." Silence. Then, a pain-laden acknowledgement. The Emperor could hold back the warp for a time, but not forever. Not without breaking entirely. Wukong looked toward the sky, where the warp storm quivered, as if sensing their connection. "You ask me to hold the line with you?" he asked. "To stand against gods older than stars? To fight in a war that never ends?" A faint whisper of truth. "Yes," Wukong sighed. "You truly are insane." And yet, his grip tightened around the Rui Jingubang. He thought of the heavens he had once defied, of the mountain that had tried to imprison him, of the scrolls of destiny he had burned to prove free will mattered. He thought of his journey for enlightenment, of discovering that strength meant nothing without purpose. Perhaps, in another life, he would have walked away. But this galaxy of broken people desperately clinging to survival? This throne-bound god carrying the sins of trillions? This endless war fought by those who no longer remembered why? It stirred something in him. Not pity, not duty. Something stranger, something older. A flicker of righteous rebellion. "If the universe wants to devour you," he said softly, "then I will devour it first." His eyes blazed. "But let me be clear. I do this not as your servant." The air pulsed. Wukong straightened. "I do this as myself." The chaos gods react. The warp storm convulsed. Khorne bellowed, the sound cracking reality. Tzeentch hissed, furious and intrigued. Slaanesh moaned with predatory delight. Nurgle whispered in heartbreak. 4 divine wills collided. The galaxy shook. They had assumed the Monkey King would be a toy, a trophy, a prize to be reshaped. Instead, he had chosen neither chaos nor Imperium. He had chosen to stand where no one else could, to oppose them, to protect nothing but the idea of freedom, to fight for a world that was not his. And that made him dangerous, far beyond anything they had feared. The warp surged, trying to swallow him whole. Wukong raised his staff. The storm shattered against him like waves against stone. "You are loud," he growled into the immaterium. "And I am tired of listening." The final understanding. The Imperium forces watched in awe and terror as the warp withdrew, not defeated, but wary. The demons retreated into rifts that snapped shut. The sky slowly cleared. The storm thinned. Wukong stood alone in the center of a ruined battlefield between gods and men, breathing slowly, calmly. He did not gloat. He did not laugh. He simply stood, like a mountain that refused to bow, like a star that refused to dim. He looked toward Terra, toward the distant light of the Astronomicon, burning with the Emperor's dying will. "I will stand in your shadow for a time," he said, "but do not ask me to kneel. I kneel to know heaven." The Emperor's fading presence shivered not in anger, but gratitude. A pact had been made, unspoken, unbreakable, not of loyalty, not of worship, a pact of warriors, a pact of burdens, a pact between a dying god and an immortal rebel. Sun Wukong turned away from the ruined hive, walking into the smoke, into the broken horizon, into the war-torn future of a galaxy that had no place for hope. Until now. The great sage equal to heaven had chosen his side. Not the Imperium, not chaos. He chose the galaxy itself, and the galaxy trembled.